My boyfriend was super close to his college professor. I think that there is something going on. My name is Lucy, and I've been dating this guy named Bob for a while now. He's a few years younger than me, but it's never been an issue. He's really sweet, kind of shy, but super thoughtful. I really liked him a lot. He makes me laugh, and I always feel comfortable being myself around him. Everything had been good, or at least, it had felt that way before things changed. It all started last year when Bob took this class. It was some kind of creative design course, and the teacher was a young woman named Sarah. Bob said she was really cool, super passionate about design and all things artistic. They talked about their work, they talked about their hobbies, and Bob told me that Sarah had even become his friend after the class ended. I had this feeling in my gut that things weren't quite right. I know I shouldn't have worried. Bob always told me that there was nothing going on with Sarah. He kept saying she was just a friend. But I just felt like Sarah had this weird vibe going on around Bob. Bob told me she was a great teacher. He told me she loved the stuff they worked on in class, but something about how she described their interactions always seemed a little intense. Maybe it's because Bob's a guy and Sarah is a woman, and they share common interests and passions, but Bob kept saying that Sarah just wanted to be friends. He even said her husband was the one who was making a big deal out of their friendship. Bob tried to reassure me. He told me I didn't have to worry about it, and I believed him. But I still couldn't help feeling a little wary. And then came the plastic model show. Bob's friends were super into building these awesome plastic models, and they had a competition at this big show in town. They invited everyone to go, and of course, Bob went. He told me Sarah came too, and she'd even invited her friend Linda to join the group at the Airbnb they rented. He said they had drinks after at this bar next to the show, and the group kind of got a little buzz. And it was when Bob told me about what happened at the Airbnb that I really started getting nervous. He said that after the bar, everyone went back to the Airbnb to relax for a while before going home. He said he was there, of course, hanging out with his buddies. But then he said that Sarah and her friend Linda were at the Airbnb too, and Sarah asked Bob for help with this plastic model kit she'd won at the competition. I could hear the playful tone in his voice as he explained it to me. Yeah, we all just hung out, he said. It was cool. We talked about different designs and stuff. She was super excited, and she was really thankful that I offered to help her put it together. But again, something about his story didn't seem right. It didn't seem like a totally normal, friend, situation. Sarah asking him for help with a plastic model kit at an Airbnb full of Bob's friends, it just seemed weird to me. That weekend, Bob went to the plastic modeling show again. This time, his friends group was hosting a big get-together at a cool new restaurant before the show. Bob told me that a bunch of his buddies were going to be there, as well as Sarah and her friends. He invited me, but I told him I was going to have a night in. Bob said he'd be back pretty late, and I got ready to watch a movie. I'd worked late that night, and I was feeling tired. After Bob left, I couldn't help myself. I pulled up his phone. It was stupid, I know. I knew that invading someone's privacy was wrong, but I felt I had to do it. It just felt so weird, like he was keeping a huge part of his life hidden from me. And then I found a text from Sarah. I am super stoked about this night. It was harmless enough, but when I opened the thread and saw the text conversation, my heart started to race. It seemed like there was a secret between them. It seemed like there was a side to Bob that he wasn't showing me. It felt like there was something going on between them, something more than just a regular friendship. And my intuition was starting to get the better of me. Hey, let me know if you are at the dinner, Sarah's message read. Hope to see you there. Then, a little while later, don't be too late tonight. Got a surprise for you. I knew that the surprise Sarah was talking about was probably harmless. I'm not the kind of person who thinks the worst. But it was how the words were written, the tone that seemed to shimmer between the lines. It was almost flirty. After that night, I started to notice things I hadn't noticed before. I started seeing how often they texted each other. Hey, how was your day? Or, what are you working on these days? It was casual, yes, but there was an intimacy there that made me uncomfortable. I couldn't stop feeling like she was always trying to get closer to Bob. It started to affect my sleep. I couldn't get her out of my head. My mind started to race every time Bob's phone beeped. I started wondering, had she asked him to go to that modeling show alone? Why hadn't she invited me? That's when I knew I had to do something about it. I knew it was going to be awkward, maybe even messy. I didn't want to start a big fight. But I felt like I was losing Bob to her, even if I didn't want to admit it. Bob was spending all this time with Sarah, but I felt like she was becoming this third wheel in our relationship. It just felt like she was stealing him away. I could imagine Bob ending up with her, leaving me in the dust, feeling so betrayed. My gut told me that things were going wrong, but I didn't know how to stop it, how to stop her from trying to win him over. I couldn't even bring myself to admit it to Bob. I just felt this weird combination of hurt and anger, like someone was stealing the love of my life. After a month or two, things started getting really out of control. I couldn't bear it anymore. The anxiety was eating me up inside. So, I sat Bob down, and I told him how I felt. It wasn't a fun conversation, but I had to let him know how much Sarah's presence was affecting me. I wanted to stop Sarah from interfering with us. Bob's eyes went wide, his brow furrowed with concern, when I started talking. "You don't understand, it's nothing like that," he said. "She's just a friend." "I know that, but it feels like more than just a friend," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're hanging out with her, texting with her. It feels like you're more focused on her than you are on me. It's like I'm losing you." He seemed upset, not at me but at Sarah. "What did she tell you?" I asked. "It feels like she's trying to be more than just friends." Bob sighed and slumped back in his chair. "Yeah, Sarah's being kind of a pain in the neck," he said. "I don't know what's gotten into her." He said that he'd actually had a conversation with Sarah after I'd expressed my concerns. He'd told Sarah that I wasn't comfortable with their constant contact, that it made me feel uneasy, and that he wanted her to tone it down a bit. He said that she'd gotten defensive at first, but eventually agreed to pull back and just see them occasionally, not text all the time. "You think that's enough?" I asked. Bob told me he hoped it would be enough. He insisted that it was just a friendship, that I wasn't reading too much into it. After that talk, Sarah did ease up a little. It wasn't a perfect fix. I could still tell that she liked Bob, even if they only talked occasionally. It didn't make the situation better, it just made me anxious and frustrated. A few weeks later, Sarah texted Bob again. "I'm excited about this plastic model competition at the park this weekend," she texted. "Let me know if you guys are going. I can swing by your Airbnb too." "Did she text you that?" I asked Bob, holding back my anger. I felt a wave of nausea. What had been one little conversation with Sarah, and a bunch of messages that had made me uncomfortable, was becoming a huge headache and an annoying distraction. "We'll see," Bob said. "She's going to be at the park this weekend, I guess. I'll try to avoid her if I can." I couldn't let it go anymore. This was turning into something I couldn't handle. "Bob," I said, "this needs to stop. If she's going to be there, we need to make a plan to do something else." "She's harmless," Bob said, his voice almost desperate. "I don't care if she's harmless," I told him. "You're dating me, not her. You're spending too much time with her." Bob was starting to get agitated. "I can't just avoid her," he said. "I've tried telling her that it's a little too much, but I don't want to hurt her feelings." "I feel like it's more than her feelings," I said. "I'm afraid I'm going to lose you to her. I don't want you to choose her over me, and I know that you don't want that either." Bob was still trying to convince me that it was just a friendship, but I wasn't buying it. I realized how crazy it sounded, a few text messages and a handful of conversations over a period of several months. It really wasn't so much of a drama, not really, but it felt like a giant, tangled mess, something that threatened the whole thing I had with Bob. So, I told him I would go with him to the event. If she was going to be there, then I'd be there, too. He wasn't thrilled about it. I knew he would feel trapped if we were all there, together. But I felt like it was the best way to show Bob, to show Sarah, that I was taking things seriously and not going to let things slide anymore. On the day of the competition, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a mistake. Sarah's presence was a real buzzkill. "She's just going to make a big show out of it," I said to Bob. "I hope she doesn't ruin the day." I knew Bob would probably feel embarrassed if Sarah tried to act up again. He was always a little sensitive when it came to the whole teacher thing. But it felt like I'd put my foot down and said what I had to. We got to the park and found a shady spot where we could watch the competition. Some of Bob's buddies from his group were already there. The event was really cool. A whole bunch of people brought their models, and it was kind of an amazing showcase of skill and creativity. Bob told me that they had to make these models from scratch, building, sanding, painting them. It was cool to see these intricate creations on display. But my mind was on Sarah. Bob told me she'd texted him a little earlier, saying she was stuck at work and might be late. But I was still bracing myself. I wasn't looking forward to the awkward, forced greetings and her constant presence hovering near Bob. Then, the event ended, and people started gathering up their things to leave. Bob said that everyone from the group was planning to head over to this new bar in town to celebrate. But right then, a text popped up on Bob's phone. I watched him scroll through the text and then look up, looking a little confused and awkward. "Sarah," Bob whispered, a little sheepish. "She's stuck at work and isn't going to make it to the bar tonight." A sigh of relief swept through me, even as I felt something strange, almost a little betrayed, as well. I'd been preparing myself for this dramatic scene, for Sarah to make everything super awkward again. And now that it wasn't happening, I felt like my own nerves were making things into something more than they actually were. At the bar that night, I tried to forget about it all. I tried to focus on enjoying myself. Bob's buddies were all great, and we had some fun celebrating. But later, while driving home, I realized that this drama with Sarah wasn't something I could simply leave behind. I told Bob that I was concerned about how much time he spent with Sarah. And I was anxious that he was keeping this side of his life hidden from me. I couldn't stop thinking about those texts and how she'd tried to meet up with him, how she'd gone to the same events as him, how it felt like she'd always been trying to steal his attention. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about all the times I'd felt weird and insecure about Sarah. I thought about Bob's explanations, and the reasons why he'd kept saying I was overreacting. But it wasn't really a good reason for him to keep a huge part of his life secret, a huge part that I felt threatened by, from me. I felt like he hadn't tried to reassure me. It felt like he was hiding something, keeping a part of himself secret from me. And that really hurt. After a couple of days of thinking about it, I knew what I had to do. I needed to set things straight. I couldn't let Sarah keep causing trouble, keep invading our relationship. It wasn't easy, but I grabbed my phone and opened up a new window. I knew exactly where to go. There were these forums, online message boards, blogs, spaces for people to share their experiences and their thoughts. It was all anonymous. You could create a username and not use your real name, and there were boards for just about everything, for relationships, for books, for music, for everything. And one of these forums had a section just for relationships. It was a popular spot for people who were dealing with complicated relationships or had personal experiences they wanted to share. I'd found the forum a few months before, when I started feeling those first uneasy feelings about Bob's friendship with Sarah. I found it helpful to hear what other people were dealing with, to see that I wasn't the only one who was facing these issues. I clicked the Create New Post button, and my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had to do something. This had to stop. I needed to get Sarah out of our lives and make Bob realize that we needed to prioritize each other, not some random girl who was trying to steal my boyfriend away from me. I couldn't reveal any names or identifying information. That was one of the rules of the forum, but I knew that my story was going to find the right audience. So, I started typing. The more I wrote, the more things seemed to click into place. I hadn't even realized how much it had bothered me. I'd thought I was crazy. I'd thought it was all in my head. But, as I started typing out all of the things that had made me so nervous and uncertain, I realized it was much bigger than just an overactive imagination. It was really, truly, a situation that felt like it had gone beyond a simple friendship. As I read back over what I'd written, I realized that I had a problem, a serious problem. It felt like Sarah had been manipulating me all along, and now it was really affecting my relationship with Bob. It felt like I had to say something. I had to get it all out, let everyone know. I clicked the Publish Post button, and my post went live. The title I'd used was simple, nothing too fancy. Do I need to worry about my boyfriend's teacher? As I read back over the words, it hit me there was no going back now. I'd made it public. I had no choice but to let everything play out and see what happened. And, I couldn't believe it, but things happened fast. It was like someone had pressed a fast-forward button on my life. People started commenting on my post immediately. They started telling me their own stories about teachers who went too far and messed with their relationships. They seemed to sympathize with me. They felt my pain, my frustration. They said I wasn't crazy for feeling uneasy. They said that I had a right to be mad and that Bob was in the wrong, that Sarah was being manipulative and should have stayed out of it. My story was a hit. My anonymous confession was viral. People felt for me and told me that I needed to stand up for myself. That's when I started to feel some sense of relief. I was no longer alone. I had these voices behind me, giving me advice, supporting me, letting me know that it was okay to walk away if that's what I needed to do. The more I read the comments, the more I realized I couldn't let Bob back into my life, not if he was going to choose Sarah over me. I had to move on. And then came a text message from Sarah. It was one of those text messages where you have to click the link to read it. She'd found my Reddit post, and she decided to give her side of the story. It was basically a long and angry rant, with all these accusations and explanations, saying she'd been framed, saying I'd completely misinterpreted her, that I'd misunderstood the whole situation. She told me how wrong I was about the whole modeling show, how much Bob was always defending me, saying that I wasn't happy about Sarah being his friend. And she said that she'd never gotten drunk or said anything offensive at that dinner. It was just a bunch of people laughing and joking around. It wasn't a good look for Sarah. She'd written this huge, defensive rant, and in it, she made Bob look like a liar. It was hard to tell who to believe, especially since Bob never offered a defense against Sarah's claims. But something had changed in me. I wasn't sure if it was the online support I was getting or the way Sarah's rant had exposed her for being someone who wouldn't take responsibility for her actions. I finally understood that she was manipulative. It was obvious that Sarah wasn't happy that I had shared her side of the story with everyone else. She made it clear that she was mad that I'd spilled the beans on her, that I'd revealed her for who she really was. And then she blocked me on Reddit, so I couldn't reply. She'd gone after my post, trying to discredit it. It was awful. She'd gone online to discredit me, and I could see it. Sarah was a huge mess, and now she was really starting to freak out because I was speaking my truth. Bob texted me later that night, and his tone was strained. His words were almost accusatory. He didn't say that he was siding with Sarah, but he also didn't offer to defend me against her attack. He kept trying to brush it all off. It made me feel so alone, so abandoned. Sarah's upset that you shared this, he said. She didn't know that was going to happen. She just wanted to set the record straight, but you posted a bunch of lies about her. I just stared at the words on my screen. I felt a chill run down my spine, a feeling of betrayal. He couldn't believe the things Sarah was saying. I could see the doubt in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but I could see that Sarah had cast a spell over him. No, I just wanted to tell my side of the story, I told him. There's nothing I'm trying to hide. It just feels like she's attacking you, Bob said, almost whining. You were so mean to her on that post. And why'd you even do that? It was the first time he was directly questioning my intentions. Why are you taking her side? I asked. I felt myself losing my patience. I don't know what you mean, Bob said. I'm just saying you've really upset her. You know she's always been flirting with you, I told him. And why do you have to pretend like you didn't know what she was doing? There was silence. It's not a big deal, Bob said, and she's not doing anything wrong. You're overreacting. I knew this was going to be the final straw, the one thing that was going to make me walk away, not from Bob, but from this whole situation. Do you think that's how it looks to me? I typed, my fingers trembling, my stomach knotting with a mix of anger and heartache. And by the way, if Sarah is so harmless, I wrote back, why don't you ask her to reach out and explain everything? Bob never answered. I ended things with Bob the next day. We'd tried, but it was like there was always some invisible wall between us. I'd reached a breaking point, a point where I realized that this mess had become too complicated, too painful, to continue. I couldn't handle it all anymore. There was just too much to worry about, and I didn't have the energy to fight. Bob told me how sorry he was, but I knew that he was also secretly hoping that he could keep things going with both of us. That was the last time we spoke. I just moved on. That was months ago, and I still can't believe it happened. It felt so surreal, like I'd been living through some weird, bizarre drama. I never expected to find myself in a situation with someone else interfering with our relationship, but it had happened. It happened to me, and it happened to a lot of other people, too. My experience showed me that it's okay to speak up, that it's okay to express your concerns and to say, no, when things don't feel right. I'm proud that I stood up for myself. It hurt to lose Bob, especially because he never even took my side in the end. He'd let Sarah take over the whole situation, and he'd just kind of stepped aside. But I'm glad I finally understood that he would have never prioritized me. And I'm thankful for all of the support I got from strangers online, who helped me see what was really going on and get through this horrible time. I don't want to look back and regret it. It hurt, but I learned so much from it all, and that's something to celebrate.